Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into my continuing series where I look ahead at 3 different college football teams' future 2023 schedule. And today we're looking at Notre Dame, the independent, and a pair of Pac-12 teams, USC and Oregon. Of course, I love doing this. It's just something fun to look at the future schedules, see how they align. And guys, how about Notre Dame playing the week 0 game? I believe they get 2 bye weeks. You can see there's 4 dates to be announced, and they do have the independent schedule. We, of course, know they're heavily in bed with the ACC. They're facing Duke, Louisville, NC State, Pittsburgh, along with Clemson and Wake Forest, all from the ACC. But they travel to Dublin, Ireland, my home city. I'm kidding, guys. Everyone thinks I'm Irish. I don't think I'm Irish. I don't know. Maybe I am, but I never looked up an ancestry thing or anything like that. Either way, they've got that game against Navy, the neutral site game. Sam Hartman, the transfer quarterback from Wake Forest who set all the records. You know, that's a great get for Marcus Freeman. I am really high on Marcus Freeman as a coach, as an amazing culture fit. Right now, I have Notre Dame as my preseason number 12 overall team. They're knocking on the door of the top 10. They had a great bowl win against South Carolina, and they get a nice, easy game against Navy, but that triple option in week 0 in a neutral site game across the pond, it could be a little annoying. I still think Notre Dame gets the job done. Then they've got Tennessee State. That's an easy win, obviously. They get a bye week really early in the season, and then they do get Central Michigan, another very easy win. How about Ohio State? Their 4th game at home. Going to be huge for recruiting, huge for that program. It's the return game of the home and home, and you're facing an Ohio State team breaking in a new quarterback with a very suspect young offensive line after Ohio State whiffed several times in the transfer portal looking for a legit offensive tackle. That could be a game if you're Marcus Freeman. You know, it would be huge for your program if you can beat them. The USC game is not right after the Ohio State game. I know it looks like that, but if you look at the date, it's October 14th. So they're going to have one of those, to be announced games sprinkled in there. So, it's not like you face Ohio State and USC, but that's tough. Both Ohio State and USC, but you get them both at home. USC with Caleb Williams, but getting them at home, you would think that defense a little suspect for the Trojans. It is a winnable game. Wake Forest, Sam Hartman facing his old team. Easy win there. At Clemson is really hard. At Stanford, that game, the last game of the regular season, November 25th for Notre Dame. That should be an easy win. At Duke could be kind of challenging. We know Duke is improving, but they still don't recruit very well. So I'm not 100% confident that Duke is going to be able to replicate the success that they had, but I know they have a really highly regarded coach who has turned things around there. At Louisville, that's going to be a tough game. At NC State is at least semi-difficult, but it had got a little bit easier with Devin Leary leaving. And then Pittsburgh at home. Guys, this Notre Dame schedule is brutal. I'm just going to tell you that right now. The week 0 neutral site game, it's just not going to be fun. It's not like Navy is this great team. They'll probably be a 6-6, 7-5 team next year, although you never know. But still, facing the triple option, week 0, a team that really is good with ball control. 2 easy wins after that. Ohio State at home. We all know Ohio State's, they're always a top 5 program, even if they're breaking in a new quarterback, Ryan Day, and his pedigree with QBs. That's a very hard game. USC facing Caleb Williams, very challenging. Wake Forest at home is a gimme. At Clemson is still brutal. Even though Clemson maybe isn't recruiting as well, still going to be very hard. Probably a top 15 team, and Clemson's going to want revenge after getting humiliated at Notre Dame this past season. Stanford's an easy win. You got to beat Duke, even though they are improved. Louisville could be sneaky hard, but you got to win that game. And then at NC State and versus Pittsburgh, I am not high on Pittsburgh next year. I know a few people have them inside of their preseason top 25s. I think Pittsburgh goes 5-7. I just don't see it personally. So Notre Dame, that is a tough schedule, and I give them credit for scheduling Ohio State in the home and home, scheduling Clemson in a home and home, and then USC, of course, that's the team, kind of their rivals there. Kind of weird that they face them mid-season, October 14th. Normally it's the end of the season. Moving to USC and looking at their schedule, of course, a lot of these dates to be announced, but we do know who they face in conference play, whether it's home or away. We just don't know the order. The first game, I believe that's week 0, August 26th, versus San Jose. So they play week 0, I guess. Wow. Versus San Jose State, very easy win. Although San Jose State is not they've gotten so much better. I do respect San Jose State, and I love their logo. Nevada at home. Nevada was so horrible this past year. And then they have that October 14th game at Notre Dame, which will be extremely challenging for USC and Caleb Williams. Looking at their conference schedule at Arizona State. Arizona State's a team that brought in about 20 players from the portal, I feel like. They completely remade their roster. I don't think they'll be crazy improved, but it is going to be a different looking roster. At California, you got to win that game. At Colorado and Deion Sanders, that could be fun, but you would still think USC with Caleb Williams would have the advantage even going on the road. Probably going to be a rocking environment there with Deion in Boulder. At Oregon, that's miserable. Bo Nix returning. Oregon investing so much into their NIL. They're getting kids left and right from the portal with the use of the NIL. They're going to have a loaded roster next year. Arizona at home, that's a gimme. Stanford at home, that's a free win. UCLA at home, that's a game you got to win. UCLA is interesting, whether they start the transfer quarterback they got from, I believe it was Toledo. Oh, no, it couldn't have been Toledo. I think Kent State. They got a transfer QB from the MAC who's actually pretty good, but they also got Dante Moore, a 5-star, the number 1 quarterback right now in the nation in the 2023 class. Would Chip Kelly start him as a true freshman? There's been speculation that the reason he flipped from Oregon to UCLA, some of it was NIL, but we know Oregon, they have NIL money. It was mainly because Bo Nix went back to Oregon and he wanted to start right away, and he thinks he can start as a true freshman at UCLA. That's kind of a little interesting dynamic to throw in. You've got Utah at home. That you got to beat Utah. I know Utah is good, but they do lose some. They are returning Cam Rising, but they lose their top tight end and their top corner. And, couple that with the fact you lost 2 games to them on the road by 1 point, and then in the Pac-12 championship, Utah is a team you have to beat at home, and then Washington at home. I mean, the Pac-12 is brutal. So Washington, they're in a lot of preseason top 10 lists. They're going to have a really good offense returning the number 1 passer in the nation. It just comes down to Washington. How much does their defense improve? But this schedule for USC, you've got 2 free wins out of conference, but at Notre Dame is brutal. And then when it comes to the conference play, at Oregon versus Washington versus Utah, those are your rough games. I could really see this conference eating itself. If you're USC, you have to, the thing is you cannot lose 2 games. So if you lose to Notre Dame, you've got to run the table. If you beat Notre Dame, you've got to beat Oregon, and you've got to beat Washington. The thing that's manageable out of the best teams in the Pac-12, most of their games are at home. Like, they get Utah at home, they get Washington at home, they get UCLA at home. They kind of only have 1 really tough road game at Oregon. So I would say that Notre Dame's schedule is certainly harder than USC's, but it's just the Pac-12 who basically returned all their quarterbacks outside of DTR. So it's a very hard conference next year. Moving to Oregon's schedule, they of course return their own starting quarterback, Bo Nix, who is one of the Heisman favorites. I believe he's 3rd or 4th right now in the overall odds. And they begin with a nice little FCS warm-up versus Portland State. At Texas Tech week 2. Texas Tech might be ranked week 2. That'll be interesting, but I would imagine they would win that game. And then they get Hawaii week 3. So if you're Bo Nix and you're trying to have a final hurrah and possibly a Heisman campaign, you could not have picked a better schedule to start with. You get to juice up your stats versus an FCS team. You get Texas Tech, who's always horrible on defense. That should be a shootout. You should get huge stats in that game. And then Hawaii, they were terrible this past year, and they've been bad the past few years. That is a great setup if you are Bo Nix looking to really get maybe 12 or 13 total touchdowns in the first 3 games. Looking at their conference schedule, at Arizona State, that's a game you got to win. California at home, that's a gimme. Colorado at home, that's a gimme. Oregon State, of course, that should be the last game of the regular season. They should be a fun team with DJ Uiagalelei, but I would figure that Oregon would kind of get payback on Oregon State this year and win that game, especially since it is at home. They get USC at home. They get Washington State at home. At Stanford is a gimme. At Utah and at Washington, those are going to be your 2 rough games. But I do think it is a distinct, easier schedule for Oregon than USC, based off of the fact that they don't have a tough non-conference game. The Week 2 game against Texas Tech might be slightly challenging, but just looking at this, you got to beat USC at home. You have to win all those home games because you do have 2 very hard road games at Washington and at Utah if you are Oregon. The goal is to go to the Pac-12 championship with 1 loss and, possibly make the playoff if you win the Pac-12 championship. Obviously the goal is to go undefeated, but I'm just saying in general, if you do slip up and these are, harder schedules, especially those 2 road games, you're probably going to slip up and lose to someone. But, we'll see what happens with Oregon, USC, and Notre Dame. Notre Dame, certainly for an independent, facing Ohio State, facing USC, facing Clemson on the road, facing Louisville on the road. Pittsburgh at NC State. This is a tough schedule for them. We will see how these 3 teams finish out. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.